Śrīla Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Gosai Maharaj ki jai, Nitila Pravishya Mishnapad Ashtatara Shatashmad Śrīla Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai, Nitila Pravishya Mishnapad Ashtatara Shatashmad Śrīla Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Gosai Prabhupada ki jai, Nitila Pravishya Mahabhagavat Śrīla Gokṣaras Babaji Maharaj ki jai, Nitila Pravishya Śrīla Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai, Nitila Pravishya Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Śrīla Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai, Shri Rupa Nugariya Guru Varga ki jai, Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Patadas Raghunath Shara Gosai Prabhu ki jai, Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gaur Parshad Vrinda ki jai, Namachay Śrīla Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Braja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai, Sarva Abhishta Bhradata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai, Shri Radha Kund Shyama Kund ki jai, Shri Mona Devi Ganga Devi ki jai, Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrindati ki jai, Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai, Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya ki jai, Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai, Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, Samagata Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Safala Akarashi Titi ki jai, Akarashi Titi Palan Kari Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Grantaraj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai, Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Dandavat Pranam, Indira Mataji. All right. Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Radhikaya Priyatmane Shri Śrīmad-Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Śrīmate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya eva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratishe Namaha. Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha. Yam Pravrajantam Anapetam Apeta Krityam Vaipaya no Viraha Katara Ajuhavo Putreti Tanmayataya Taravo Bhinedu Stang Sarva Bhuta Hridaya Munimanatosmi Narayanam Namaskritya Narang Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayit Shrinvatang Sakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridantastoya Bhadrani Vidunoti Suritsatam Nashta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatuttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki Tavai Vasmi Na Jivami Tvaya Vina Iti Vigyaya Radhe Tvam Nayamam Charanantikam Bhaktya Vihina Aparada Lakshai Kshiptashtakama Ditarangamadhe Kripa Maitam Sharanam Prapana Vrinde Namaste Charanaravindam Bhaja Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Chapter 15, Description of the Kingdom of God. Text 1. Maitreya Uvacha Prajapatyam tu tatteja parateja hanangditi dadhara varshani shata shankamana suradhanat. Sri Maitreya said, My dear Vidura, Diti, the wife of the sage Kashyapa, could understand that the sons within her womb would be a cause of disturbance to the demigods. As such, she continuously bore the powerful semen of Kashyapa Muni, which was meant to give trouble to others for 100 years. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The great sage Sri Maitreya was explaining to Vidura the activities of the demigods, including Lord Brahma. When Diti heard from her husband that the sons she bore within her abdomen would be causes of disturbances for the demigods, she was not very happy. There are two classes of men, devotees and non-devotees. Non-devotees are called demons, and devotees are called demigods. No sane man or woman can tolerate the non-devotees giving trouble to devotees. Diti, therefore, was reluctant to give birth to her babies. She waited for 100 years so that at least she could save the demigods from disturbance for that period. Wait, what? Wow, so they were 100 years old in the womb. Loke tena hata loke lokapala hato jasha Nyavedayan vishvasreje dhanta vyati karam disham. By the force of the pregnancy of Diti, the light of the sun and moon was impaired in all the planets, and the demigods of various planets, being disturbed by that force, asked the creator of the universe, Brahmā, what is this expansion of darkness in all directions? Purport. It appears from this verse of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam that the sun is the source of light for all the planets in the universe. The modern scientific theory, which states that there are many suns in each universe, is not supported by this verse. It is understood that in each universe there is only one sun, which supplies light to all the planets. In Bhagavad Gita, the moon is also stated to be one of the stars. There are many stars, and when we see them glittering at night, we can understand that they are reflectors of light, just as moonlight is a reflection of the sunlight. And other planets also reflect sunlight. And there are many other planets which cannot be seen by our naked eyes. The demoniac influence of the suns in the womb of Diti expanded darkness throughout the universe. Deva uchu tamaitar vibhoveta samvigna yadvayam prasham nahya vyaktam bhagavata kalena sprishta vartamana. The fortunate demigod said, O Great One, just see this darkness, which you know very well and which is causing us anxieties. Because the influence of time cannot touch you, there is nothing unmanifest before you. Brahma is just herein as Vibhu, and as the personality of Godhead. He is the supreme personality of Godhead's incarnation of the mode of passion in the material world. He is non-different in the representative sense from the supreme personality of Godhead, and therefore the influence of time cannot affect him. The influence of time, which manifests as past, present, and future, cannot touch higher personalities like Brahma and other demigods. Sometimes demigods and great sages who have attained such perfection are called Trikalagya. Deva Deva Jagadatar Lokanata Singhamane Shikamane Paresham Aparesham Tam Bhutanam Asibhavavid. O God of the demigods, sustainer of the universe, head jewel of all the demigods and other planets, you know the intentions of all living entities, both in both the spiritual and material worlds. Purport. Because Brahma is almost on an equal footing with the personality of Godhead, he is addressed here as the God of the demigods. And because he is the secondary creator of the universe, he is addressed as the sustainer of the universe. He is the head of all the demigods, and therefore he is addressed here as the head jewel of the demigods. It is not difficult for him to understand everything which is happening in both the spiritual and material worlds. He knows everyone's heart and everyone's intentions. Therefore he was requested to explain this incident. Why was the pregnancy of Diti causing such anxieties all over the universe? Namo Vijnana Viryaya Mayaye Damupa Upeyushe Grihita Guna Bhedaya Namaste Vyaktayodaya. The original source of strength and scientific knowledge, O original source of strength and scientific knowledge, all obeisances unto you. You have accepted the differentiated mode of passion from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. With the help of external energy, you are born of the unmanifested source. All obeisances unto you. Purport. The Vedas are the original scientific knowledge for all departments of understanding, and this knowledge of the Vedas was first impregnated into the heart of Brahma by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, Brahma is the original source of all scientific knowledge. He is born directly from the transcendental body of Garbhodaksha Vishnu, who is never seen by any creature of this material universe, and therefore always remains unmanifested. Brahma is stated here to be born of the unmanifested. He is the incarnation of the mode of passion in material nature, which is the separated external energy of the Lord. Yetvayananina bhavina bhavayantatma bhavana atmani pratabhuvana param sarasaratmakam. O Lord, all these planets exist within yourself, and all the living entities are generated from you. Therefore, you are the cause of this universe, and anyone who meditates upon you without deviation attains devotional service. Tesham supakva yoganam jita shvasendriyatmanam labdha yushmat prasadanam nakutaschit parabhava. There is no defeat in this material world for persons who control the mind and senses by controlling the breathing process and who are therefore experienced, mature mystics. This is because by such perfection in yoga, they have attained your mercy. Purport. The purpose of yogic performances is explained here. It is said that an inexperienced mystic, I don't know why I said inexperienced. It is said that an experienced mystic attains full control of the senses and the mind by controlling the breathing process. Therefore, controlling the breathing process is not the ultimate aim of yoga. The real purpose of yogic performances is to control the mind and senses. Anyone who has such control is to be understood to be an experienced, mature mystic yogi. It is indicated herein that a yogi who has control over the mind and senses has the actual benediction of the Lord, and he has no fear. In other words, one cannot attain the mercy and benediction of the Supreme Lord until one is able to control the mind and the senses. This is actually possible when one fully engages in Krishna consciousness. A person whose senses and minds are always engaged in the transcendental service of the Lord has no possibility of engaging in material activities. The devotees of the Lord are not defeated anywhere in the universe. It is stated, Narayana Para Sarve. One who is Narayan Para, or devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is not afraid anywhere, whether he is sent to hell or promoted to heaven. Bhagavatam 6:17-28. Yasya vacha praja sarva gavastante vadya yantrita aranti balamayatas tasmai mukyayate namaha. All the living entities within the universe are conducted by the Vedic directions, as a ball is directed by the rope attached to its nose. No one can violate the rules laid down in the Vedic literatures. To the chief person who has contributed the Vedas, we offer our respect. Report. The Vedic literatures are the laws of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One cannot violate the injunctions given in the Vedic literatures, any more than one can violate the state laws. Any living creature who wants real benefit in life must act according to the direction of the Vedic literature. The conditioned souls who have come to this material world for material and sense gratification those conditioned souls who have come to this material world for sense gratification are regulated by the injunctions of the Vedic literature. Sense gratification is just like salt. One cannot take too much or too little, but one must take some salt in order to make one's foodstuffs palatable. Those conditioned souls who have come to this material world should utilize their senses according to the direction of the Vedic literature. Otherwise, they will be put into a more miserable condition of life. No human being or demigod can enact laws like those of the Vedic literature, because the Vedic regulations are prescribed by the Supreme Lord. Satam vidat sasham pomangsh tamasa lupta karmanam adapradaya yadrishtya apanat arhasik shittum. The demigods prayed to Brahmā, Please look upon us mercifully, for we have fallen into a miserable condition. Because of the darkness, all our work has been suspended. Purport. Because of the complete darkness throughout the universe, the regular activities and engagements of all the different planets were suspended. In the north and south poles of this planet, there are sometimes no divisions of day and night. Similarly, when the sun does not approach the different planets within the universe, there is no distinction between day and night. Esha deva diter garva oja kasyapamarpitam deshas deshastimi rayan sarva vardhate gnir ivaithasi. As fuel overloads a fire, so the embryo created by the semen of Kashyapa in the womb of Diti has caused complete darkness throughout the universe. Purport. The darkness throughout the universe is explained herewith as being caused by the embryo created in the womb of Diti by the semen of Kashyapa. Maitreya Uvacha Saprahasya Mahabaho Bhagavan Shabda Gochara Pratachashtatma Bhurdevan Prinan Ruchiraya Gira. Sri Maitreya said, Thus Lord Brahma, who is understood by transcendental vibration, tried to satisfy the demigods, being pleased with their words of prayer. Purport. Brahma could understand the misdeeds of Diti, and therefore he smiled at the whole situation. He replied to the demigods present there in words they could understand. Brahmā uvaca manasa me sutta yushmad purvaja sanakadaya cherur vihaya saloka lokeshu vigata spriha. Lord Brahma said, my 4 sons, Shanak, Sanatan, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar, who were first born from my mind, are your predecessors. Sometimes they travel throughout the material and spiritual skies without any definite desire. Purport. When we speak of desire, we refer to a desire for material sense gratification. Saintly persons like Shanak, Sanatan, Sanandan, and Sanat Kumar have no material desire, but sometimes they travel all over the universe out of their own accord to preach devotional service. Te ekada bhagavato Vaikuṇṭha syamalatmana yayur Vaikuṇṭam nilayam sarvaloka namaskritam. After thus traveling all over the universes, they also entered into the spiritual sky, for they were freed from all material contamination. In the spiritual sky, there are spiritual planets known as Vaikuṇṭhas, which are the residents of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His pure devotees, and are worshipped by the residents of all the material planets. The material world is full of cares and anxieties. In any one of the planets, beginning from the highest down to the lowest, Patala, every living creature must be full of cares and anxieties, because in the material planets, one cannot live eternally. The living entities, however, are actually eternal. They want an eternal home, an eternal residence, but because of accepting a temporal abode in the material world, they are naturally full of anxiety. In the spiritual sky, the planets are called Vaikuṇṭha, because the residents of these planets are free from all anxieties. For them there is no question of birth, death, old age, and diseases, and therefore they are not anxious. On the other hand, the residents of the material planets are always afraid of birth, death, disease, and old age, and therefore they are full of anxieties. Vasanti yatra purusha sarve Vaikuṇṭha murtaya ye nimitta nimittena dharmena radhayan harim. In the Vaikuṇṭha planets, all the residents are similar in form to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They all engage in devotional service to the Lord without desires for sense gratification. Purport. The residents and the form of living in Vaikuṇṭha are described in this verse. The residents are all like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan. In the Vaikuṇṭha planets, Krishna's plenary feature as four-handed Narayan is the predominating deity, and the residents of the Vaikuṇṭha Loka are also four-handed, just contrary to our conception here in the material world. Nowhere in the material world do we find a human being with 4 hands. In Vaikuṇṭha Loka, there is no occupation but the service of the Lord, and this service is not rendered with a purpose. It's unmotivated, it's causeless. Although every service has a particular result, the devotees never aspire for the fulfillment of their own desires. Their desires are fulfilled by rendering transcendental loving service to the Lord. Yatra chadapamam aste bhagavan shabdagochara sattvam vishtavya virajam swanam no mridayan virisha. In the Vaikuṇṭha planets is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the original person and who can be understood through the Vedic literature. He is full of the uncontaminated mode of goodness, with no place for passion and ignorance. He contributes religious progress for the devotees. Purport. The kingdom of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the spiritual sky cannot be understood by any process other than hearing the description of the Vedas. No one can go see it. In this material world also, one who is unable to pay to go to a far distant place by motorized conveyances can only understand about the place from authentic books. Similarly, the Vaikuṇṭha planets in the spiritual sky are beyond this material sky. The modern scientists who are trying to travel in space are having difficulty even going to the nearest planet, the moon, to say nothing of the highest planets within the universe. There is no possibility that they can go beyond the material sky. There's no possibility that they can go beyond the material sky and to the spiritual sky and see for themselves spiritual planets, Vaikuṇṭha. Therefore, the kingdom of God in the spiritual sky can be understood only through the authentic descriptions of the Vedas and Puranas. In the material world, there are three modes of material qualities: goodness, passion, and ignorance. But in the spiritual world, there is no traces of the modes of passion and ignorance. There is only the mode of goodness, which is uncontaminated by any tinge of ignorance or passion. In the material world, even if a person is completely in goodness, he is sometimes subject to be polluted by tinges of the modes of ignorance and passion. But in the Vaikuṇṭha world, the spiritual sky, only the mode of goodness in its pure form exists. The Lord and his devotees reside in the Vaikuṇṭha planets, and they are of the same transcendental quality, namely Shuddha Sattva, the mode of pure goodness. The Vaikuṇṭha planets are very dear to the Vaishnavas, and for the progressive march of the Vaishnavas toward the kingdom of God, the Lord helps his devotees. Yatra naishreyasam nama vanam kama dugar drumai sarvarto shri vibrajat kaivalyam iva murtiman. In those Vaikuṇṭha planets, there are many forests which are very auspicious. In those forests, the trees are desire trees, and in all seasons they are filled with flowers and fruits, because everything in the Vaikuṇṭha planets is spiritual and personal. Purport. In the Vaikuṇṭha planets, the land, the trees, the fruits and flowers, and the cows, everything is completely spiritual and personal. The trees are desire trees. On this material planet, the trees can produce fruits and flowers according to the order of the material energy. But in the Vaikuṇṭha planets, the trees, the lands, the residents, and the animals are all spiritual. There is no difference between the tree and the animal, or the animal and the man. Here the word murtimat indicates that everything has a spiritual form. Formlessness, as conceived by the impersonalists, is refuted in this verse. In the Vaikuṇṭha planets, although everything is spiritual, everything has a particular form. The trees and the men have form, but because all of them, although differently formed, are spiritual, there is no difference between them. Vaimanika sa lalanascharitam sashvat kayanti yatra shamalakshapanani bhartu antarjalenu vikasan madhumadhavinam gandena kandita diyopyanilam shipanta. In the Vaikuṇṭha planets, the inhabitants fly in their airplanes, accompanied by their wives and consorts, and eternally sing of the character and activities of the Lord, which are always devoid of all inauspicious qualities. While singing the glories of the Lord, they deride even the presence of the blossoming Madhavi flowers, which are fragrant and laden with honey. It appears from this verse that the Vaikuṇṭha planets are full of all opulences. There are airplanes in which the inhabitants travel in the spiritual sky with their sweethearts. There is a breeze carrying the fragrance of blossoming flowers, and this breeze is so nice that it also carries the honey of the flowers. The inhabitants of Vaikuṇṭha, however, are so interested in glorifying the Lord that they do not like the disturbance of such a nice breeze while they are chanting the Lord's glories. In other words, they are pure devotees. They consider the glorification of the Lord more important than their own sense gratification. In the Vaikuṇṭha planets, there is no question of sense gratification. To smell the fragrance of a blossoming flower is certainly very nice, but it is simply for sense gratification. The inhabitants of Vaikuṇṭha give first preference to the service of the Lord, not their own sense gratification. Serving the Lord in a transcendental love yields such transcendental pleasure that, in comparison, sense gratification is counted as insignificant. Parvatanya bhrita sarasa chakravaka datyohahangsa shukati tiriparhinam ya kolahalo viramate chiramatramocha Bringadipe harikatam ivakayamani. When the king of bees hums in a high pitch, singing the glories of the Lord, there is a temporary lull in the noise of the pigeon, the cuckoo, the crane, the chakravaka, the swan, the parrot, the partridge, and the peacock. Such transcendental birds stop their own singing simply to hear the glories of the Lord. Purport. This verse reveals the absolute nature of Vaikuṇṭha. There is no difference between the birds there and the human residents. The situation in the spiritual sky is that everything is spiritual and variegated. Spiritual variegatedness means that everything is animate. There is nothing inanimate. Even the trees, the ground, the plants, the flowers, the birds, and the beasts are all on the level of Krishna consciousness. The special feature of Vaikuṇṭha Loka is that there is no question of sense gratification. In the material world, even an ass enjoys his sound vibration. But in the Vaikuṇṭhas, such nice birds as the peacock, the chakravaka, and the cuckoo prefer to hear the vibration of the glories of the Lord from the bees. The principles of devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting, are very prominent in the Vaikuṇṭha world. So beautiful. Mandara kunda kurabo palak champakarna punaganaga bakulam bhujaparijata kander chite tulasika bharanena tasya yasmin stata tapasu manaso bahumanayanti. Sorry, I went to sleep at 1 o'clock this morning. Although flowering plants like the mandara, kunda, kurabaka, utpal, champak, arna, punaga, nagakeshar, bakula, lily, and parijata are full of transcendental fragrance, they are still conscious of the austerities performed by Tulsi, for Tulsi has given special preference by the Lord, who garlands himself with Tulsi leaves. The importance of Tulsi leaves is very clearly mentioned here. Tulasi plants and their leaves are very important in devotional service. Devotees are recommended to water the Tulasi tree every day and collect the leaves to worship the Lord. One time, an atheistic Swami remarked, "What is the use of watering the Tulsi plant? It is better to water eggplant. By watering the eggplant, one can get some fruits. But what is the use of watering the Tulasi?" These foolish creatures, unacquainted with devotional service, sometimes play havoc with the education of people in general. The most important thing about the spiritual world is that there is no envy among the devotees there. This is true even among the flowers, which are all conscious of the greatness of Tulsi. In the Vaikuṇṭha world entered by the four Kumaras, even the birds and flowers are considered of the even the birds and flowers are conscious of service to the Lord. Yat sankulam haripadanati matra drishte Vaiduryamarakaṭahe mamayar vimanai Yeshan brihat katitata smitasho vimukya Krishnatmanam rajata adadur utsmayata. The inhabitants of Vaikuṇṭha travel in their airplanes made of lapis lazuli, emerald and gold. Although crowded by their consorts, who have large hips and beautiful smiling faces, they cannot be stimulated to passion by their mirth and beautiful charms. What kind of flower is lapis lazuli? Whatever. Purport. In the material world, opulences are achieved by material persons by dint of their labor. One cannot enjoy material prosperity unless he works very hard to achieve it. But the devotees of the Lord who are residents of Vaikuṇṭha have the opportunity to enjoy a transcendental situation of jewels and emeralds. Ornaments made of gold bedecked with jewels are achieved not by working hard, but by the benediction of the Lord. In other words, devotees in the Vaikuṇṭha world, or even in this material world, cannot be poverty-stricken, as is sometimes supposed. They have ample opulences for enjoyment, but they need not labor to achieve them. It is also stated that in the Vaikuṇṭha world, the consorts of the residents are many, many times more beautiful than we can find in this material world, even in the higher planets. It is specifically mentioned here that a woman's large hips is very attractive, and they stimulate the man's passion. But the wonderful feature of Vaikuṇṭha is that although the women have large hips and beautiful faces and are decorated with ornaments of emeralds and jewels, the men are so absorbed in Krishna consciousness that the beautiful bodies of the women cannot attract them. In other words, there is enjoyment of the association of the opposite sex, but there is no sexual relationship. The residents of Vaikuṇṭha have a better standard of pleasure, so there is no need of sex pleasure. Śrīrupini kvanayate charanaravindam Līlām pujena hari sarvani mukta dosha samlakshate spatika pudya uppetaham himni samarjitva chati vayaranu brahane nyadyatna. The ladies in the Vaikuṇṭha planets are as beautiful as the goddess of fortune herself. Such transcendently beautiful ladies, their hands playing with lotuses and their leg bangles tinkling, are sometimes seen to be sweeping in the marble walls, which are bedecked at intervals with golden borders, in order to achieve the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. This is verse 22. In the Brahmā Samhita, it is stated that the Supreme Lord, Govinda, is always served in his abode by many, many millions of goddesses of fortune. Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasam Brahma Sevyamana. Oh, lapis lazuli is a precious stone. Okay, cool. Thanks, Dita. Lakshmi Sahasra Shatasam Brahma Sevyamana. These millions and trillions of goddesses of fortune who reside in the Vaikuṇṭha planets are not exactly consorts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but are the wives of the devotees of the Lord, and also engage in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is stated here that in the Vaikuṇṭha planets, the houses are made of marble. Similarly, in the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that the ground on the Vaikuṇṭha planets is made of touchstone. Thus, there is no need to sweep the stone in Vaikuṇṭha, for there is hardly any dust on it. But still, in order to satisfy the Lord, the ladies there always engage in dusting the marble walls. Why? The reason is that they are eager to achieve the grace of the Lord by doing so. It is also stated here that in the Vaikuṇṭha planets, the goddesses of fortune are faultless. Generally, the goddesses of fortune do not remain steadily in one place. Her name is Chanchala, which means one who is not steady. We find, therefore, that a man who is very rich may become the poorest of the poor. Another example is Ravan. Ravan took away Lakshmi secretly to his kingdom, and instead of being happy by the grace of Lakshmi, his family and his wife were vanquished. Thus, Lakshmi in the house of Ravan is called Chanchala, unsteady. Men of Ravan's class want Lakshmi only, without her husband Narayan. Therefore, they become unsteady due to Lakshmi. Materialistic persons find fault on the part of Lakshmi, but in Vaikuṇṭha, Lakshmi ji is fixed in the service of the Lord. In spite of her being the goddess of fortune, she cannot be happy without the grace of the Lord. Even the goddess of fortune needs the Lord's grace in order to be happy. Yet in the material world, even Brahmā, the highest created being, seeks the favor of Lakshmi for happiness. Vapeshu vedramatatāśpamalādmritapsu preyashan vita nijavane tulasi bhirishan abhyarchate svalakam onasam ikshavaktram ucheshitam bhagavate Shri. Translation: The goddess of fortune worship. The goddesses of fortune worship the Lord in their own gardens by offering tulsi leaves on the coral-paved banks of the transcendental reservoirs of water. While offering worship to the Lord, they can see on the water the reflection of their beautiful faces with raised nose, and it appears that they have become more beautiful because of the Lord's kissing their faces. Purport: Generally, when a woman is kissed by her husband, her face becomes more beautiful. In Vaikuṇṭha also, although the goddesses of fortune is naturally as beautiful as can be imagined, she nevertheless awaits for the kissing of the Lord to make her face more beautiful. The beautiful face of the goddess of fortune appears in the ponds of transcendental crystal water when she worships the Lord with tulsi leaves in her garden. Almost at the end. Yana vrajanta vidorachananuvadach Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ye vishaya ikutkatāh matigni yastu shrutāh tavagar nrivirātasaras tangstan chipantya-sharaneshu tamarsu sanhanta. It is very much regrettable that unfortunate people do not discuss the description of the Vaikuṇṭha planets, but engage in topics which are unworthy to hear and which bewilder one's intelligence. Those who give up the topics of Vaikuṇṭha and take to talk of the material world are thrown into the darkest region of ignorance. Purport: The most unfortunate persons are the impersonalists, who cannot understand the transcendental variegatedness of the spiritual world. They are afraid to talk about the beauty of the Vaikuṇṭha planets, because they think that the variegatedness must be material. Such impersonalists think that the spiritual world is completely void, in other words, that there is no variegatedness. This mentality is described here as kulpata, or matigni. intelligence bewildered by unworthy words. The philosophies of voidness and the impersonal situation in the spiritual world are condemned here because they bewilder one's intelligence. How can the impersonalist and the void philosopher think of this material world, which is full of variegatedness, and then say that there is no variegatedness in the spiritual world? It is said that this material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So unless there is variegatedness in the spiritual world, how can there be temporary variegatedness in the material planet? That one can transcend this material world does not imply that there is no transcendental variegatedness. Here in the Bhagavatam, in this verse particularly, it is stressed that people who try to discuss and understand the real spiritual nature of the spiritual sky and the Vaikuṇṭhas are fortunate. The variegatedness of the Vaikuṇṭha planets is described in relation to the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. But instead of trying to understand the spiritual abode and spiritual activities of the Lord, people are more interested in politics and economic developments. They hold many conventions, meetings, and discussions to solve the problems of They hold many conventions, meetings, and discussions to solve the problems of this material situation where they can remain for only a few years, but they are not interested in understanding the spiritual world. They rot in this material darkness continuously. Ye vyartitam api chano nrikatim prapanna jnanam chatatta vishayam sahadharmam yatra naradhanam bhagavata vitarantyamusha samohita vitataya patamaya yate. Lord Brahma said, "My dear demigods, the human form of life is of such importance that we also desire to have such life, for in the human form one can attain perfect religious truth and knowledge. If one in this human form of life does not understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his abode, it is to be understood that he is very much affected by the influence of external time." Purports. Brahmaji contemns very vehemently the condition of the human being who does not take interest in the personality of Godhead and his transcendental abode of Vaikuṇṭha. The human form of life is desired even by Brahmaji. Brahma and the other demigods have much better material bodies than human beings, yet the demigods, including Brahma, nevertheless desire to attain the human form of life because it is specifically meant for the living entity who can attain all transcendental knowledge and religious perfection. It is not possible to go back to Godhead in one life. But in the human form, one should at least understand the goal of life and begin Krishna consciousness. Yeah, because there's a big misconception, and I see lots of times with devotees that going back to Godhead is just kind of just like going to heaven. And if I do my rounds and I don't criticize anybody and I follow the basic rules, then I'll go back to Godhead. What Srila Prabhupada says here. Yeah. It is said that the human form is a great boon because it is the most suitable boat for crossing over the Nescience ocean. The spiritual master is considered to be the most able captain in that boat, and the information from the scriptures is the favorable wind for floating over the ocean of Nescience. The human being who does not take advantage of all these facilities in this life is committing suicide. Therefore, one who does not begin the Krishna consciousness movement in the human form of life loses his life to the influence of the illusory energy. Brahma regrets the situation of such a human being. Okay, we're ending with this verse. Oh my god, this purport's long. Maybe we won't read this full purport though. We'll read the purport tomorrow. यच्चाव्रजन्तनिमिषां वृषभानुवृत्या दूरे यमाह्युपरिणस्पृहणीयशीला पर्तुमितस्य यशसा कथनानुरागा विक्लव्यबाष्पदकलाय पुलकितृतङ्गा. Persons whose bodily features change in ecstasy and who breathe heavily and perspire due to hearing the glories of the Lord are promoted to the kingdom of God, even though they do not care for meditation and other austerities. The kingdom of God is above the material universes, and it is desired by Brahmā and other demigods. Alright, so we'll read the purport to this tomorrow. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur, Hari Bol. Jai Shri Guru Gauranga Gandhari Giridhari, Shri Radha Vinod Bihari Ju ki jai, Shri Govinda Gopinath Maran Mohan Ju ki jai, Nityalrupa Vishnu Vishnupal, Ashtatara Shata Shishmat Shila Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj Shila Guru.
It's 8 o'clock.
Nityalrupa Vishnu Vishnupal, Ashtatara Shata Shishmat Shila Bhakti Vedanta Vaman Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nityalrupa Vishnu Vishnupal, Ashtatara Shata Shishmat Shila Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada ki jai. Nityalrupa Vishnu Vishnupal, Ashtatara Shata Shishmat Shila Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Goswami Maharaj ki jai. Nityalrupa Vishnu Vishnupal, Ashtatara Shata Shishmat Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Nityalrupa Vishnu Mahabhagavat Shila Gokshara Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nityalrupa Vishnu Shila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nityalrupa Vishnu Mahabhagavat Shila Gokshara Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Nityalrupa Vishnu Shila Satchidananda Bhakti Vinod Thakur ki jai. Nityalrupa Vishnu Vaishnav Sarvabhauma Shila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj ki jai. Shri Rupa Gauriya Guru Varga ki jai. Shri Rupa Sanatan Pata Raghunath Shri Jeev Gopal Pata Shaghunath Sharada Goswami Prabhu ki jai. Shri Sarup Damodar Rai Ramanandari Shri Gopashada Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Shila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Shri Kshetra Mandala Gaura Mandala Vaja Mandala Mathura Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sarva Abhishya Bharata Giriraj Maharaj ki jai. Shri Radhakund Shamakund ki jai. Shri Yamuna Devi Ganga Devi ki jai. Shri Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi ki jai. Shri Bhakti Devi ki jai. Shri Purnamasi Yogamaya ki jai. Shri Gopeshwar Mahadev ki jai. Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Samagata Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Safala Akara Shri Titi ki jai. Titi Palankari Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Ananta Koti Grantharaj Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki jai. Shri Nitai Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Vancha Kalpatarubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Oops. Vrindai Tulsidevaya Priyai Keshavashacha Krishna Bhakti Paradevi Satyavataya Namo Namo. Vancha Kalpatarubhyashta Kripa Sindhubhya Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namo. Were you falling asleep, Indira Mataji, because I was falling asleep? Was I being contagious? Yeah, I was up working with Jai Gopal till like past midnight, I think. Was it 1 o'clock in the morning? It might have been 1 o'clock in the morning. So I didn't sleep very much. And I also didn't sleep in the day yesterday, so all that combines just makes me really tired right now. All right. Hari Bol. Sorry about that, Ben. Remember before they're doing Chaturmasya? I think during Purushottam month, was it? I can't remember when, but I was falling asleep like every day. And I've gone through a long streak of never falling asleep. This has been the first time in a while, isn't it? Anyhow, it's just, yeah, anyhow. Okay, Haribol.